I have a quick story. 2023 New York Comic Con, and everywhere I look, I see a book called Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees. There's promotion all over the place. What is this? I didn't know. Little did I know that IDW's Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees would become one of my absolute favorite series from the entire year of 2024. And we have the honor of speaking to the writer behind the book, the artist behind the book, and its sequel, Beneath the Trees, Rite of Spring. Very, very excited to have Patrick Horvath on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me on.
You're very welcome. And what I just said about Beneath the Trees, the first one, not the sequel, uh, that book caught everybody that I know who was at that event or who read it in the aftermath by surprise. No one, I don't remember hearing a word about it until that con, and the buzz was, you guys have got to check out Beneath the Trees. And then we finally did, and wow. First of all, congratulations on an incredible series. What a big success. How has that changed your career trajectory?
First off, thank you again. Thank you for inviting me on, and thank you for the kind words. It's been a bit of a mind blower, especially in 2024 when I really sort of started to get a grasp on just how like wildly wide the book had spread, and the readership had grown. I wasn't anticipating any of it, so I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it. It's great. I mean, it's yeah, I'm not gonna lie, like it's what you hope for. It's funny because as you sort of, painted the picture of, for a lot of folks, I seem to just pop up out of nowhere. And I had this book. And my buddy recently put it really well and said it was like an overnight success that was like a decade in the making.
Right.
In regards to just, I've been writing, I mean, I've been writing screenplays since like 2000. So 20 years of just writing story. And then also I have a background making movies, writing and directing film. And also just, I've been drawing for since I was like 5. And I'd been wanting to do comics and had been even like self-publishing like little stuff for a while. Uh, but it wasn't until like 2011 that I was like, oh yeah, I miss drawing. I hadn't drawn for a long time. I was like, I miss drawing. And then when I started really getting back into it, I was like, I should really think about doing comics because it would be a really great way to be able to fulfill like, narrative storytelling. And then also I get to incorporate the drawing part, which I love, and that, and why not? Perfect. That's hey, there's this thing called comics. Have you heard of it? So so I anyway, and then I had friends who, were very, very gracious and hipping me to a lot of wonderful books to dig into. And then around 2016, I really started reorienting myself with, or reacquainting myself with the current landscape of comics that were the things that were coming out from the big publishers and also from the creator owned stuff, and just to see what it was like. What are people putting out right now? And so I would say like since 2016 was like actively like, oh, I should like let's start doing the work. And had pitched some stuff where I was the artist with a writer, one comic writer, Ben Cook. He and I had put together a pitch that went around, and some people were into it, but it never ultimately went anywhere and things like that. So this was like just a random, totally random opportunity to pitch to IDW at that specific time. And it was just complete like happenstance that I knew somebody that was there through movies. He was part of the Orchard, which had distributed one of the last movies I wrote and directed on, which is an anthology called Southbound. And then his name's Paul Davidson. And then he showed my stuff to Mark Doyle, who at the time was like director of editorial. And he liked my art. And he's like, he writes as well. So, like, just to let you know. And Mark's like, well, let me know if he wants to hop on the phone. And I was like, I do want to hop on the phone. And I had like these 5 or 4 pitches, I think, at the time. And this was one of them. And it was just all that stuff. I'd been like writing pitches, the ideas, and keeping them in a file, and like over years, you know what I mean? Like all these things were just accumulating. And then finally I just had, and there was like, and then there was this, and then the door opened a little bit. And then I pitched, and then they were like, "We want to see more on this one. We love this idea." And then that's how it happened.
What? So, what's the transition going from writing screenplays, I feel like there's a understood format involved,
Yes,
um,
most definitely.
where comics it is the Wild West sometimes. You know,
For
a
sure.
script for a
Yeah.
comic looks 100% different than your neighbor's script. What was that transition like for
Yep.
you?
It was a lot of figuring that out, just trying to figure out like what my comic script would look like, to have what my format would look like for it, which honestly looks a lot like Jim Zub's. And bless his heart for being so transparent about like all the different aspects of making
Yes.
comics. Like
Yes.
he is obviously a teacher through and through, in addition to being an awesome storyteller. But he had put up, I think at the beginning of the pandemic, he had put up a bunch. He's like, here's some scripts. Here's like a Red Sonja script. This is how they look when I make them. And I was like, oh, this is clean. Like I like this. And I think because I was so hungry for that sort of format in some regard, um, from my experience doing screenplays, that I saw that immediately. I was like, oh, let me just like create some style in the Word doc and like make it look like Jim Zub's here, and we'll be in, we're in good shape. And after that, I was fine. The thing that's interesting to me though is that like when you write a screenplay, there's a lot of different people you're writing that screenplay for. You know what I mean? Like you're writing it for the producers to like greenlight it. You're writing it for actors to read it and then internalize it. You're reading it for like all the different department heads to understand the vision of what it's going to be. There's a lot of like nuts and bolts stuff with it that you have to incorporate while also still making it a fun read, etc. And then with comic scripts, like I'm the audience and my editor, like you know what I mean, like and the letterer, right? But the if I end up working with a colorist, which I'm sure I will at some point, like it's for them too. But it's a real small group of people, way more casual, and it's honestly a lot more fun for me to write because I don't have to keep spinning these plates in my head of like who all is going to be reading this. Do I have to dumb it down or whatever so that certain people understand it that need to, and you know what I mean. So that's for me, those are sort of the big differences.
I remember when we spoke at New York Comic Con, one of the things that you mentioned was like you are the director as well. So you, like the
Mhm.
of the process, right? Yes, you don't have to write for these other people. When it comes to putting the art down, choosing the angles, being able to describe the moments and the beats in between, you're able to uh like more, I guess, better break down pages and better break down moments for you.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you wear, in my, again, because I come from movies, probably, um, I end up like breaking down everything as if I was different department heads, like in my head, you know what I mean? So I'm the actor when I'm performing, when I'm trying to get the performance out of the characters, but then I'm also the director when I'm trying to, get the emotion and the cohesive story, like the overall story, and then I'm also like a production designer when I'm putting together sets, and I'm wardrobe when I'm trying to figure out what they're going to wear, and I'm props when I'm giving them stuff to do, you know what I mean? Like in my head, I kind of think of all these things and try and give everything its due thoughtfulness so that it works together to tell the whole story.
Now, Beneath the Trees, Rite of Spring is the sequel to the smash hit, out of nowhere, super successful Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees. And the big thing to take away from this is that if you want to read this book, this sequel, which I'm telling you right now, this is a Comics Pals promise, you definitely do. If you haven't read Beneath the Trees, the first series, you should. You really, really should. But if you have and you're excited for the next one, June 2nd is the pre-order deadline. So you're going to want to hit up your LCS, let them know that you want this. That way it's circulating and you can guarantee your copy. And then it's going to be released on July 9th. So that's when you're going to be able to hit your shop and just grab it off the shelf. But the best way to help out Patrick and IDW is to pre-order by June 2nd. Make sure you do that because we got the chance to read the first issue of the sequel, and I can't even imagine missing out on this. Genuinely.
I was upset. I finished the issue and I'm like, Oh, I got this too early. I want it now.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you guys.
No, that's the best thing I could say. At the same time, I was like, oh, okay, all right. I'm gonna read this again. I'm gonna like mind wipe myself, get ready for it when it comes out. But I'm excited. This was not where I expected the story to go by the end of the first volume. But it's
Right.
very interesting.
Well, I appreciate hearing that. I definitely wasn't sure when I started putting it together exactly how it was going to shape up. But I mean, I mean, we could just to sort of lay the sort of the broad strokes of where the sequel is coming from. It's a time jump into the future from where we left off from the first volume, and it's about 8 years later. And in that time, characters that have survived the first book have gone on to live their lives. We're going to touch base with some of them as they and see sort of how their lives have gone on, how the trauma of the first book has affected them, let's say. And then also it sets the settings now like in the 1990s, whereas like the first volume was sort of it's 1986 specifically in the first one. So now we're like 1994. And what was interesting to me about that was to have all these new elements like the internet having like urban expansion with like corporate land development in suburbs, and then like big box stores showing up, taking over a lot of business from like mom and pop on Main Street stores, or hardware shops, let's say. And so like there were all these elements that were like, and globalization's also a thing, so we're losing factory work to overseas stuff, and those are all like, to me growing up, that was like the time where I was like becoming a teenager and stuff. So like it really sort of has been haunting my memory now that I'm like decades older, and I'm like thinking about all this stuff is affecting where we're at right now, but also how it affected the time then. I never really wrapped my head around it. And in a sense, like the world's just getting smaller. And it's getting smaller for Samantha. And we're gonna see like how she reassesses her place in it.
Now, for anybody who's unfamiliar with Beneath the Trees, essentially it follows this murder bear named Samantha, who is cute as buttons, but also a killer. And I I was deeply affected by this series. I love animals, and for some reason, watching these anthropomorphic animals just get murdered really hurt.
Yeah.
And I thought it had a lot of interesting, thoughtful things to say about, humanity and the way we kind of look at ourselves, but also the way we treat animals. Like they are animals, but they eat animals, and we're animals that eat animals. And there's
Yes.
just so many like very, very interesting things inside the book that compelled me. But by the time I got to the end, I was like, all right, this has been a massive success. How do you follow up on this? Is there a reason to come back? And so when I opened the first issue that we were provided by IDW, thank you so much. Huge shout out to Greg Katzman. Um, I'm like, oh shit, here's the angle. Here's the different angle. And I was so happy that you kind of found a way to inject new life into the ongoing story by just bringing someone new into the equation.
Yeah.
Do you
Well,
mind
and
if we
it
talk? Sorry,
no,
go ahead.
yeah, I think I mean the main thrust of this second arc has to do with its repercussions from the issue one of the first volume, which is there's this the first victim you see Samantha take is this duck who's basically like a grad student in the city. His name's Danny Brewer, and he essentially is just abducted by her. And it sort of like also sort of illuminates kind of what this serial killer life that she leads is like, right? And it's a big it was definitely like the big moment in that first issue, I felt like. And even when I was making it, um it struck me that like there was just so much more you could do with um with these characters. And I was sort of like, it's same thing with Cherry Gherkins too. Like there were just these moments where like I was like, oh, like we have to tell the story, and there's obviously needs to be like there's murder involved with it because we're the serial killer, so like these things happen, right? But then by the time I got to issue three, which is, without spoiling anything too much, in issue three, it deals with grief a lot. and repercussions. And so like I was thinking, especially at the end of issue 3, I was like, you know what? Like we need to have like a repercussion in terms of what Sam does to these families that she's affecting by essentially disappearing. They don't even find like the murdered bodies. Like they just disappear, which is arguably even worse because you just don't know.
Right.
And that sort of haunting like really grabbed me. And I was just like, well, I want to explore that. Like what would that sort of obsession be like to like just need to find an answer that's virtually impossible to find. And so that was my starting place with why, you know, where I went into with Rite of Spring. And the main character is the Doc's sister. It's Danny Brewer's sister, Monica, and she's essentially been in the city for 8 years since his disappearance, just trying to find out what happened to him. And in 8 years of that like fruitless search, like this is where we meet her. So like she's been gnarled in many different
Right.
ways from this. And you know, yeah, we're setting up a collision course between Monica and Samantha. Um, and the, you know, the main thrust is kind of seeing how this unfolds amongst like all of the other things I've already sort of mentioned in terms of the setup for the second arc.
And in that first issue of the first volume, like the way she describes, like, do we even know? We don't even learn Danny's name, do we? In the
If
first.
you were paying attention, you would see it on the flyer for the cover of issue 5
Okay, got it,
of the
got it.
first volume. Like it's so like hidden.
But the whole point is that it's random.
Yeah.
She's clear about that. It's almost like she goes into the city, finds someone at random, and that's just how she gets rid of that urge. And which I think is like a Gacy. I think did something similar.
Bundy, I think
Uh,
Ted Bundy was like he would like pretend
yes, yeah,
he had like a injured arm and needed a hand,
yeah.
like with a boat. I think it was like a boat trailer or something, totally like random. And yeah, it was the Good Samaritan essentially.
Yep,
Was
yep. And then
like,
going into the city
which is
too, where like beats
100%
people
like
up.
what I would do. That's kind of why I gave it to her. Like I would be the duck. Like I'd be like, oh, I can
Sure.
help you out. Like
Oh,
you
yeah.
need a hand, no problem. Yeah, and but yeah, like you said, that Samantha the killer, like her MO is like it's very much needs to be random, which is how she totally just randomly plucked
But
that student in the first issue.
so this human or this being is essentially a statistic, really, for her. That's all it matters. But now we're seeing the other end of the coin in the second volume, and that's not
Yes.
like there is. I feel weird saying humanity, but there's humanity there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, like Sean, when you brought it up, how how affecting like some of the stuff was. I felt the same when I was making it. I was like, it's weird, but I feel like if these were just people, it wouldn't be as impacting as it is with the cute animals. Because somehow there's an innocence that you're ascribing them. And I feel like which is tapping into the nostalgia probably that a lot of us have with like children's books and things like
Right.
that, which is like sort of getting into the weirdness of why it was so popular, I feel like. But there's something to that innocence and the violation of it, that is sort of brings about this humanity that we're kind of seeing in these like people. And it's a weird it's weird like how that works, and I can't even like totally describe it all, but I know when it's right and when it's not wrong or whatever. Like there's definitely like a seriousness to it. There's gravity to the whole thing. Like it's not, none of it's flippant or being like cute for the sake of cute or whatever. Like it's not like that. It's very, I definitely like, I wanted it to be cute and fun, and I also wanted it to be very dark and very upsetting.
And it strikes that balance perfectly. And what I realized throughout reading the first series as it was unfolding was there's a desensitization that we have towards violence against humans
Oh yeah.
that most of us don't have when it comes to animals. I've seen things I would never even describe on this podcast happen to humans, but I will
Mhm.
not watch animal violence. I can't see it.
Sure, yeah.
And I think in a weird way, the book kind of plays off of our desensitization, where if you go, what if they were humans? It doesn't hit as hard. But
Yeah.
it also
Yep.
makes you think about that and ask those questions, which
Why
is what I
doesn't it
love
hit
about
as
it.
hard?
Right.
You know, why am I eating these animals? Like,
Exactly.
you know what I mean? Like
Exactly.
those are all definitely part of those things. Bears murder other animals all the time. like in nature or whatever, right? So it's also like, but we can all agree like it's different with people, right? And so there's just, there's all these things that I honestly don't even know. I don't know. I mean, I have my own, interpretations of all of it, obviously, but I think it's more important for readers to have their own, to bring their own interpretations to it,
Sure.
and then connect the dots. Um, because to me, that's sort of that's art. For me, that's the fun of it.
And that's what was surprising about that first issue, the first kill we see, was that like I've been reading comics a long time. I read most of The Walking Dead. Like people are getting cut in half all over there.
Sure.
That first issue made my stomach churn, and I was like, oh, haven't had that happen in a while. That's impressive for this book to do. So it was refreshing in a way, even from like the comic side of things, like for like a horror book to actually elicit something out of me.
And it's a horror book from a different, like a completely different angle. And that's like, we are absolutely, I feel like I say this all the time. We're in a horror renaissance. There's no doubt in my mind
Sure.
about that.
Yeah, yeah.
There are so many great horror movies right now,
Mhm.
especially comics. It's exploding as a genre. But this is a book that kind of takes that horror angle and it sprinkles some cuteness on it. And it puts some
Mhm.
animals in the mix. And it makes you think and ask deep questions and look at things from a different angle. So that's what when I buy a non-Big Two comic, what I'm looking for the most is something different because I already have an allotment for superhero comics. But what else can
Sure,
I get?
sure.
And this was that different, and that's why I loved it.
Well, I appreciate hearing that. I mean, I definitely took, you know, uh, the extra effort to try and do, I don't know. I mean, a lot of it, honestly, is sort of it's me following the inspiration of whatever sort of weird thoughts that I'm having. And especially with that first volume was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to get a chance to do, I had no idea if anybody's going to be into this, you know what I mean? But I was like, well, this is like, this is bizarre to me. Let's do this. Like, this is interesting. Let's make this happen. Like when we got to issue 5, I was like, I guess it's in the second person now. And like, she's like totally kind of having a meltdown. And I didn't even know if I thought people were just going to hate it because it's so strange. And instead, like a lot of people are very into that. I mean, it's been very surprising, but also encouraging that I sort of can, continue to sort of follow this weird, whatever, thing that's striking me is like, oh, I need to, I really need to explore whatever this is, and it's being well received. I think maybe it's because I'm just sort of, you know, even though I think I'm doing something that's maybe strange-ish, unique to my own, what I think is my own brain is probably actually tapping into something that a lot of people can relate to, but maybe just isn't being talked about or whatever, or showing up in art or whatever. But like it to me, that's the fun of it for sure.
I love what you just said because there are absolutely stories that connect with us for reasons that we can't explain,
Sure.
that tap into our unconscious mind, thoughts that we're not thinking, but we don't know
Hmm,
we're
hmm,
thinking.
hmm.
And then that thing comes out and it's like, whoa, that touched me, that affected me, that impacted me. And as a creator, you don't know who that's going to happen to. You didn't know how much that book impacted me before I just told you. But it's
Right.
there. That connection is there.
Yeah, it's definitely I mean, yeah, I thought again, going back to the Jim Zub School of Comic Making, he was very like upfront about modest expectations. If you're gonna do a creator own, like here's what you can expect. And it would be like, if you're lucky, like you'll do like 12,000 issue 1, and then you're gonna have attrition between issue 1 and 2 to like maybe 10,000, and like and on and on. And then like probably you're gonna find your audience with the trade. And then, and then you just keep doing the next one and whatever. And so this I was expecting that or worse, because I was just a no name. And so when it did find an audience, I was just sort of, I wasn't expecting it. But I think I mean, it's funny because like I've been making movies for a little while, like small independent films. And it's fun and I enjoy doing it. Um, but and I'll probably do more again. But I also just like where I'm at right now in my life, like it's weird. But as soon as I started doing the comics, like when I started doing this, I was like, this is what I need to be doing right now. Like it was very much like I'm in my spot right now. You know what I mean? Like I'm
Sure.
happy to be here and continue making comics. Because it's just very gratifying to have a place where you can connect with people like this.
Now, speaking of connecting with people, our community is very big on this book and has been for quite some time. I want to remind everybody that if you want to get your hands on Rite of Spring, which is the sequel to Beneath the Trees, the best way to get it and help out Patrick and IDW is to pre-order it. The pre-order deadline is coming up. It's June 2nd. Anytime you go to your comic shop, you can just talk to the person behind the counter and say, hey, I want to add this book to my pull list. I want to add Beneath the Trees, Rite of Spring to my pull list, and they can help you out with that. And so that's by June 2nd. But then also, if you just want to go into your LCS and get it, that's July 9th. But remember that June 2nd date because that's how you help the creators out the most to make sure that your store is ordering a copy and that it will be in your pull box the day it drops. Now we got a super chat a few minutes ago from Hayden's Hideout. Marco, you wanna grab that?
Yeah, and just to echo on, more Patrick Horvath if you want. Also recently came out with Free for All by Oni Press. I'm on the Horvath train, so I picked this up when
Yes.
it came out. We'll talk a bit more about this one, but Hayden's Hideout asks the Comics Pal Discord community recently held a book club discussion for Beneath the Trees. During our conversation, I mentioned how the animals could be allegories for different types of people. Samantha, for instance, is a bear. Bears can have a cuddly exterior, especially teddy bears, but possess a killer instinct on the inside. Birdie is a turtle, as turtles are innocent, meek creatures that hide in their shell, much like some people hide in their mental shells. Were these animal choices made consciously, or am I just overanalyzing things? Thank you for your time.
Yeah. Short answer, yes.
Yeah,
Essentially like I mean I came up with a drawing like in 2017, I think I figured out was when I did it. And it was an anthropomorphic bear walking down a like on a hillside or something with an axe on their shoulder, and it was bloody, and they're wearing overalls. And I immediately was like, oh, it'd be interesting if there was like a serial killer in like a children's book town, like Richard Scarry children's book town or something. That would be really funny, like not funny, but like totally like interesting and pretty compelling. And then I had that idea of the song Teddy Bear's Picnic, and then the line beneath the trees where nobody sees, they hide and seek as long as they please. And I was like, yes, like that we could do like a serial killer story set in a children's book town, and it'd be called Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, and it has to be a bear. And the more I thought about it, bears are very cuddly, but then they're also like totally terrifying and vicious, and so I was like, that's perfect. And then the more I sort of thought about different animals and stuff, I sometimes I play against, expectations, or definitely lean into them, depending on what's going to happen in the story. And so, like for instance, with Birdie the Turtle, I for sure like gave him a bit of trauma, and now he's very much an introvert, like even more so. And so like it's but at the same time, like, well, I don't want to get into spoiler stuff if anybody hasn't read the rest of volume 1, but it's yeah, they definitely take them all into consideration, but not like yeah. Sometimes it's sort of for different reasons.
yeah. Um, and there's a separate question from Max Appleman who mentions, "Do you recommend listening to Stravinsky's Rite of Spring while reading?" That was the question that I had. Is any connection to the ballet there?
Yeah, definitely. There's a connection to it. I chose the title "Rite of Spring" partially because of that, and then partially in terms of well, I mean, it's the Rite of Spring has to do with sacrifice, and so that's gonna play a part without spoiling too much. But you can assume people die. Somebody will die. That's not spoiling anything. Um, and so, but the question is who or whom, and it was yeah, that was definitely part of it. Listening to the actual Stravinsky piece like probably couldn't hurt. I mean I feel like I haven't quite actually landed on like what the soundtrack is. In my mind, like the first volume was very Bob Seger, like Dolly Parton inspired at the time. And so and I'm not sure what the 90s is for this, but I think that there's like a I don't know. It's funny. My my wife has a uh this like stereotype of classical music because the way it shows up in pop culture is almost only when like serial killers are listening to it. So like anytime something shows up, it's like, oh, they're the killer, like or whatever, and it's usually right. So like, I mean, case in point, Silence of the Lambs, and so so anyway, so yeah, I'm gonna say yes. Listen to it. That's my fight. That's what I'm gonna say. I'm just gonna
That's
leave it
the
at that.
backdrop.
Yeah.
And then we got a super chat from Hecatron 499. Thank you, dude, who says, "Hey Patrick, be honest. How cathartic was making Free for All? It sure was cathartic reading it."
Yeah, I 100%. I wrote that out of the wake of the 2016 election, and I ended up, I mean, it's wild that it came out this year. Just in terms of like how supercharged all that stuff that was basically felt like put into motion in our modern times, at least, kind of is come to fruition. So yes, it was very cathartic to work on it. And I mean, I think I finished it like 2020. So it's definitely been, I mean, it was, yeah, again, it was just so wild that the timing of it worked out to coming out in 2025. And like, Elon Musk is running around slashing departments from the government or whatever, right? And yeah, anyway. So yes.
Put him into the arena. Just toss
You
him in
put
there. Wouldn't hurt. Couldn't hurt. And I do like the tagline "Capitalism by Combat." So
Not far off.
hey,
Right.
hey,
Yeah.
Literally in some instances.
the,
Yikes.
the question I did have, there is an instance in the book where there are protesters to this,
Oh yeah.
and I thought that was an interesting aspect. You don't dig into it too much, right? It is very much
No.
about the that the premise of billionaires and multimillionaires and there being a threshold to the amount of wealth that one could accumulate. But I did like your inclusion on, as much as that can go in a certain political direction, there's always a level of like, let's pull back off of a brink. And in that case, there was a poster of somebody saying, there is no righteous violence. And that stuck out to me as just something interesting because yes, this is, two billionaires, two millionaires going at it, but at the same time, there's a twistedness to like how barbaric it is at the end of the day. And
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's problematic. Like
yeah,
it's definitely like I'm not endorsing actual murder of like rich people, but the thing is that was wild to me is that like when the main inception of it was sort of like a lot of the trouble I feel like we're in is rooted in turmoil from income inequality, which to me is like the greatest sort of like disruptor of all civilization. And it felt like if there was any way to just sort of like, instill or create like a universal basic income and healthcare, education, like if just the fundamentals of life weren't necessarily tied to labor and all that, and how much more we could enrich ourselves in society because of that, like that'd be amazing. I was like, well, how would you even fund that? And at the time, I think was it 2016? There was definitely it was right around then. The Warren Buffett and Bill Gates had created the pledge or whatever that was like
oh yeah,
anybody
like
around a certain threshold, like they were trying to inspire them to donate 50% or more of their wealth to philanthropic causes, which is a problem. Like rich people having philanthropy is also a problematic thing, but like let's set that aside. And so, but I was like, what if there was like a global edict that was like if you're over a certain threshold, you get put into a lottery. And if you're a wealthy person chosen by the lottery, then you have to donate this pledge, this 50%. of the, or more if you want, but at least 50% of your wealth towards the greater good, which is going to be, dispersed across all these nations. And then I was like, or you can have the like, I'm totally cynical, but I was like, we can have the option to not donate anything, but you have to fight to the death for it. And it's totally voluntary. But I was like, I bet there would be people that would insist on fighting to the death to keep this money. And it, yeah, and then I was just sort of off to the races with the whole thing. But to have like all like violence at the center of all of it felt like very like it was a corrupt sort of kernel, right? And then ultimately like it's going to be a problem, like it's problematic. So it's like, of course there's this sort of like utopia, but at its heart like it involves death and like this very brutal sort of combat. And I was like, that's like a very Paul Verhoeven sort of satire just waiting to sort of be told. And it seemed like it just, I don't know, it seems every time you have a utopia you sort of like, it's like Logan's Run or something where you're like, they're like, oh no, yeah, they have carousel when they turn 30 and they don't need to, but it keeps the population down, or whatever the whatever the thing is. There's a darkness at the center of a lot of these things.
And I think it makes sense, right? Like it's an interesting incentive, and like I feel like that's what the world is driving on, right? Incentives. It's an incentive to some degree minimize greed, and obviously
Sure.
you extrapolate to some point, right? So yeah, but a lot of fun, and also uh, I think one of the things that I feel like I noted was the growth in art, in particular, like the kinds of moments that you choose to accentuate. I feel like there are less panels in Beneath the Trees than there are in Free for All, and
Mm.
because of that, I think Beneath the Trees maybe is a bit quicker pace just on like the way that you read
Oh,
it.
sure.
But I think the moments that are chosen, um, be it like a random arm or maybe a smaller close up as opposed to some of the larger settings that you choose, I think it was really interesting to see how you have changed a bit as an artist.
Yeah, it's even, I mean, even the beginning of there's a huge jump between Free for All and Beneath the Trees for sure. And then even at the beginning of like issue one, Beneath the Trees, to issue six, like there's definitely an evolution. And I'm trying really hard to maintain, consistency, which is always how it is. But it's like that's just growth. That's just what happens. And there's going to be a difference for sure between which you've already seen with the issue one of Rite of Spring. And it's definitely like, I mean, I feel like it's getting better and better. Uh and and I still really enjoy like all the issue, like in the work in issue one with Beneath the Trees, and I still really enjoy Free for All. But I'm like, they're all, every panel is like doing push-ups, you know what I mean? Like, and you're just sort of, I feel like more and more confident in the work, and realizing I can do more things with the paneling and et cetera. But the finding those story moments, those like sequential moments, is a constant like evolution for me.
So, Patrick, it's been incredible getting to talk to you. I have enjoyed this thoroughly, and I think
Oh,
our audience
likewise.
has too. Make sure that you guys run out and let your LCS know that you want to get a copy of Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, Rite of Spring. Do that by pre-ordering it. June 2nd is the deadline, so make sure you hit that. But if you don't, then you can go to your store and grab a copy off shelves July 9th. Don't miss this, because if you missed the first one, you missed a huge part of what was in the comics conversation in 2024. Don't let yourself miss out a second time. Be a part of the moment. Pre-order this book. Patrick, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. Hopefully, we can get you on when the series wraps and we can do a wrap conversation.
Oh my God, yes, please. Again, thank you guys so much for having me on. This has been a total pleasure, and thank you for helping promote this book. Obviously, like these things are, I mean, it's wild to put a book out in the world at all. And this part of the ecosystem is such a crucial part, and just like bless your guys' hearts for doing this. Yeah, and thank you so much to all the listeners. Thank you so much for, even if you haven't even heard of the book, thank you for checking me out.
Thank you guys for watching. We will see you on Thursday for Palace Pulls.